As you read your newspapers or listen to the nightly news on ABC, CBS, or NBC, be prepared for a liberal spin on news or social items. Everything from culture to politics discussed in these forums is being written by an overwhelmingly large number of liberal Democrats. The amazing thing is that these editors and journalists are not even aware of their media bias compared to the rest of the country. Studies done by UCLA political scientists and research by the Media Research Center clearly indicate a liberal bias in reporting from journalists and editorials. Over the past 25 years, surveys have been done that prove this bias. Some telling surveys include a 1981 survey of 240 journalists from the New York Times, Washington Post, Newsweek, ABC, NBC, CBS, and PBS. The poll was done by Lichter and Rothman, who wrote a book entitled The Media Elite. 54% of the journalists interviewed said that they were left of center. More than 4/5 had voted Democrat in every election from 1964 to 1976. In 1992, Indiana University journalism professors Weaver and Wilholt surveyed 1,410 journalists and found that 44% are Democrats, while 16% are Republican. 51% favored abortion, while 33% of the general public only approved of abortion. In July and August of 2001, a Kaiser Family Foundation poll of 301 media professionals, 300 policymakers, and 1,206 members of the public showed that 4% of the media identify as a Republican, while 27% say they're Democrat. Compare this to the 34% of Americans who say they're Republican and 28% who say they're Democrat. A study done by the Pew Research Center for the People and the Press surveyed 72 top journalists in September and October of 2005. They compared their answers to everyday citizens. 56% of the general public said efforts to establish a democracy in Iraq will succeed. 63% of the news media think it will fail. 17% of journalists thought that reducing illegal immigration was a top priority. Compare that to 51% of the general public who think that that's a top priority. 46% of the public believe that torture of terrorists is sometimes necessary. 78% of those in the media feel that it is rarely or never justified. So now that you know how biased our journalists are, consider who is helping them to decide what to report on. Most reporters get their news from their inner circle. This is made up of activists, special interest groups, and politicians. Most journalists don't even leave New York City or their headquarters in California, so they have no idea what the average American is really thinking about. Journalists are plagued by activists and special interest groups about every social issue out there: homelessness, gay rights, abortion, and AIDS. And because of the need for journalists to be politically correct in the editor or journalist's view, they rarely can say the whole story, the whole truth. There's even certain buzzwords that liberal journalists use when describing conservatives. In a story about the flat tax proposal by presidential candidate Stephen Forbes, reporter Eric Engberg of CBS News stated, "Steve Forbes pitches his flat tax scheme as an economic elixir, good for everything that ails us." Using words like scheme and elixir were used by Engberg to create doubt in his viewers' minds. During the 1999 Clinton impeachment trial, as the senators signed their names in a book that was swearing their oath to be fair and honest and impartial during the trial, Peter Jennings covered this live on ABC News. Jennings identified Barbara Boxer and Ted Kennedy by name and then said, "John McCain, here of Arizona, left-hander, more right than left in his politics, and intending to run for president of the United States." Then went on to introduce Senator McConnell of Kentucky, very determined conservative member of the Republican Party. Senator Mikulski of Maryland, Senator Rick Santorum, one of the younger members of the Senate, Republican, very determined conservative member of the Senate. That's Senator Daschle there in the left-hand side of your picture. Freedom of the press in the Constitution states that the government cannot dictate what the journalists report. The problem that we face in the United States is that certain activist groups, special interest groups, and politicians end up dictating what gets reported. Failing to report on certain issues is also a problem. Bernard Goldberg, who is a CBS ex-journalist, has written an insider book, an eyewitness account of what it is really like to work for the media. Hopefully in the near future, the media will realize that they will realize their bias, and they will figure out how to correct it. That way, they can get back to reporting just the facts.